Welcome to Service Titans, the podcast where we dive deep into the inspiring journeys of Black men within the AmeriCorps community. From serving in classrooms to rebuilding neighborhoods, these are the stories of passion, purpose, and resilience. Join us as we amplify the voices of members of the AmeriCorps community and share their triumphs, challenges, and the impact they've made in their communities. Whether you're a seasoned AmeriCorps veteran or someone considering service, this is the space to explore, reflect, and be inspired. Get ready to be uplifted, empowered, and connected. This is Service Titans.
The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individuals speaking and do not reflect the views of their employers, organizations, or any groups they may be affiliated with. We are here to have real, honest conversations, and that means everything shared is coming from personal perspectives, not on behalf of any company or institution. Some episodes may include discussions around sensitive topics that could be triggering or emotionally intense for some listeners. Please take care of yourself and pause if you need to.
What up, though? This is Service Titans, the show where we dive into the stories, experiences, and insights of remarkable individuals making a difference in their communities and beyond. I'm your host, Anton Taylor, and today's guest is Nathaniel Benjamin. He's the Chief Diversity Officer and the Director of Office of Minority and Women Inclusion at the SEC. And he spent more than 20 years leading in government, the military, and education. From being AmeriCorps' very first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer to shaping culture and strategy at the Department of Education, his career has been all about service leadership and making an impact through people. Nathaniel, welcome to Service Titans. It's great to have you here. I'd love to start by going back to the beginning. Throughout this podcast journey, I've found a lot of inspiration in hearing the early stories and the foundational values that drive each guest. And as a hip hop head, as the great poet Sean Carter once said, and it can't be like, we all got a story. So when you think about your early years, like what's your first memory of serving or helping others? And then I guess the second part of that is, where do you think that came from? That spirit of service came from?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Service, I would say, is absolutely ingrained into my DNA. And my first memories of service really start back being a young man in a faith-based community, being in a church, and learning the importance of service, from my parents, from my community, from my village, those that always really inspired me. And I always saw that was what a part of them was. A part of their DNA was serving. And so serving for me was very much so generational, and generational from those who I've seen, being a grandson of those that fought within the civil rights movement, you name it. And so for me, it's just been baked into who I am. And one other question that I also want to go back to the question that you said, as far as where do you think it came from? One of the cool things that I've been doing over the last few months is actually studying my family's genealogy. And, yeah, and I've been so amazed that even there are additional steps that I want to take, but just in my preliminary searches, I've been able to go back to see, my fifth great grandparents, right? Which is often unheard of, particularly from descendants of enslaved Africans, right? So it's really exciting to still see, like, the more you know your history and the more you know where you came from, you recognize what's in your DNA. You recognize the strength, and strength not only came from my ancestors, but the level of service and being able to be one that helps others is baked into who I am.
That's awesome. And I know in some small ways I started that journey of just kind of understanding that history and the shoulders that I stand on. And man, it's such a powerful experience, one, but also interesting to see the common threads of the things that, we find ourselves doing and how this kind of correlates to our family history and et cetera. So thanks for sharing that and giving that context, and also just how deep rooted the idea of service is with you. And it starts with family and your community. I want to pivot and talk a little bit, in this podcast is really focused on just the AmeriCorps experience, which is rooted in this idea of service and that we all can serve. So when you think about your time at AmeriCorps, I want to start with what drew you to the role that you're in, and what did it mean for you in that role to continue to hold space for equity and belonging? I think it's such an important thing now in this environment that we're in. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
What drew me to that position while I was with AmeriCorps, it was twofold. One, it was the mission, because volunteerism and national service is a mission that I would say expands and cross over any demographic, any specific communities. I think national service is for all communities because service is a benefit to mankind. So that was one aspect that was really exciting about the role. But then also, it was an inaugural position. And being in an inaugural position, you get the space and the opportunity to create, which is something that continuously invigorates me because you get the chance to bring an entrepreneurial mindset into a space that is mission driven and mission focused. So, those were, I would say, the two aspects that drew me into the role, but then also being able to be what I would say a champion for expansive communities, I think is always a win. I think it's always important. And serving as that catalyst, it was just a dream opportunity. So why not have a dream opportunity while you also get to see the benefits and the impact of those that are always benefited from AmeriCorps and its programs.
It's really dope to kind of be, part of that inaugural approach to not only help move the work forward, but also that entrepreneurial spirit that you talked about. I'm sure that's invigorating to be able to test some things, try some things, innovate in ways, but also know that service in itself can have its personal moments and those moments that just kind of remind you of like why you do the things you do. And I think at different times for us all in this work, it can be challenging in some ways. Were there some personal moments during that time, particularly when you're there with AmeriCorps, it really kind of helped you understand like why I'm doing this and why this work matters on such a grand scale?
Oh my gosh, I would almost say there were too many moments, but if I were to think about one defining moment, I would say the defining moment, there were several, so I'm going to give two. One defining moment was working across each and every work stream within the organization in order to help embed the work into how we conducted our work externally. That was so exciting for me. It was a great organization to be at, and working with leaders that received your vision and wanted to figure out how to help support and implement. That was a huge win. And that was that defining moment where you knew that you, not just your leadership, but the work that your team was doing was right. That I would say was one defining moment. Another defining moment, we participated in Martin Luther King Service Day and taking one of my kids with me. Yeah. And him seeing what service looked like. And even though it's in his DNA and it's baked in, it was also really gratifying and cool for him to see it from a work perspective, even though service is something that's in his spirit too. So he got to see me at work. And I think that was really cool. And so we took some really cool pictures, and that's something that'll be with him for the rest of his life.
And that's really cool. And when you think about MLK Day, one is a special day, but also makes me reflect a little bit. I had a chance a few times to take my son on a couple MLK Day events, and they're like, one, it reminds me time flies pretty fast, but also just that bond around service is something that is rememberable or remarkable to be able to do that with your son. So thanks for sharing that. And when we talk about AmeriCorps, it's particularly today's climate, there's a lot of pros and cons that people discuss on what it means, et cetera. As one who I've studied, kind of got my wings as a professional, as a man under the AmeriCorps umbrella, I understand personally how transformational it can be. I would love to hear, from your perspective in the work that you led with the AmeriCorps, can you speak a little bit about your thoughts around the transformation that AmeriCorps provides to our country and what it means for individuals?
I think about NCCC, which was a program that really helped support our young folks, 18 through 26. And to have additional options for everyone who might not necessarily move through what's known as the typical or traditional trajectories for our youth, I think that offering really stood out to me. And it was a program that I didn't necessarily know the ins and outs of prior to my appointment with AmeriCorps. And learning more about that and the service year and the educational award and things of that nature, I thought it was really cool. just for lack of better words. I thought it was really cool just to see the different sites where across the United States where we had our NCCC members. And what was really, I would say, dope about it was that it was so expansive, right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter where you were, AmeriCorps was there. It didn't matter what you looked like or what you believed. AmeriCorps was there, and AmeriCorps was there to rise to the occasion and to provide solutions. And I think that is something that might be missed at times. It's really important to amplify that message.
Yeah, Nathaniel, I would also say like MCCC is such a transformational program. And like you said, it's bringing people from so many different walks of life, traveling across the country and really making transformational impacts in communities. So I'll have to double down on that. It's incredible, like what MCCC means and like the impact that it has across the country. I'm going to pivot a little bit away from the AmeriCorps in some small ways. And I know offline we talked about just the importance of representation. So I want to talk a little bit about that if it's cool with you. Hey, you've been one of the few Black men in rooms where decisions around national service and policy and culture are made, to just keep it 100. Like, what did that experience teach you about the importance of representation? I'm sure you knew that before then, but I just would love to hear your thoughts, like being in that unique seat and being in a room that's really at the forefront of helping to like drive the policy around AmeriCorps and around service.
Yeah, I wasn't new to it. I'll say that. I've been a senior executive for some years now. And so going to AmeriCorps was more of a lateral from other organizations. And so it was a lateral in the sense of I was back into those same rooms and those same spaces. And representation is so important because the more expansive a room is, the better the thought process is. And whether that's representation from demographics, whether it's gender, whether it's experience, you name it, whatever that looks like, it's so important. And so for me, what I found incredibly gratifying was I was coming into a space where, national service and volunteerism wasn't necessarily my background, but leading people has always been a part of my repertoires. And so it was the chance where you get to be influential, yet you also become the student at the same time. So I learned the importance of so many programs from a policy perspective, but my experience helped me influence how policies were either written and or executed.
I would say just my professional career sort of been most in the nonprofit public sector. And what I've seen is that the more and more you look up within the organization, for lack of better words, the less representation, particularly when you talk about Black men in this space. And you kind of mentioned you transitioning into this sector. And I think there's no secret that there could be more growth when we talk about the representation of Black men, particularly in leadership roles, and just across the nonprofit sector in general, and particularly in AmeriCorps. Like, so are there things that you feel are like really important in this idea of having particularly Black men in leadership and having Black men show up in this space? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
I don't know if it's rooted back to AmeriCorps, but I think what I would say is, as a Black man who's been in leadership and continues to stand in that space, I think it's important for us to be prepared. I think preparation is everything, right? And what do I mean by that? There are so many obstacles that people just in general face. And as a Black man, right, wrong, or indifferent, we experience many biases that are projected on us, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, we might feel or be challenged with imposter syndrome, where there might be biases that we are aware of, but then we project it on ourselves, even if others aren't projecting it on us. Mm-hmm. And so that can be self-defeating, self-debilitating. So what I would say is, despite what others view or how others might see us, or how we might, unwillingly and unknowingly cut ourselves down, you got to be ready. Because when opportunity knocks, generally speaking, there's one time that you can run through. And so when you're ready and you're prepared and you're doing the self-work, to make sure that when opportunity strikes, that you're ready to take it full advantage. I think that's what's important for Black men. I think it's critical. And I also think what's equally important is to know what direction you want to go into. That is so important. And what I mean by that is if there is something that you want to do, work towards the mark. Because once you work towards the mark, when that opportunity presents itself, you've done the self-work in preparation.
And those are definitely some jewels you dropped there. I think one is you got to be ready, being prepared, but also you got to have a vision. So with those two in place, you're on the right track. But you mentioned something that's been somewhat of a common thread in conversations here on the podcast, which is even conversations offline, this idea of imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. And would love to hear, or were there moments in your career where you kind of dealt with that? Or what advice would you give for other young people, young Black men, just young professionals in general, or seasoned professionals? I think we all deal with it at different points in our careers. Like what advice would you give, or personally, how have you dealt with it if that's showing up in your career?
Absolutely. So if I didn't say it showed up, I would be lying. It's reared its ugly head more times than I'd like to admit. But imposter syndrome, for those that don't necessarily know, it's a self-debilitating belief that you're lesser than for whatever reason that you develop in your mind, right? So it could be, I'm not worthy because I'm too young, and those that are in this room are older than me, and maybe seasoning in age makes me think that I'm less than, even though I'm qualified to be in the room. Or it could be, I'm of a certain demographic and others aren't, and so I shouldn't be here. Or it could be something along the lines of, my educational pedigree doesn't necessarily align with those that are sitting in the room. So what it is, it's not necessarily diversity specific. It is how you unqualify yourself based on common threads that you might see in the room that you don't fall into, right? Mm-hmm. So just want to make sure that the listeners understand what it is. And so then when I'm speaking to my own experience, I've dealt with it in the sense of I've been thankful and fortunate where I became an executive at an early age. And so the average age at the time for senior executives was about 53. And I went into a senior role in my mid 30s and became a full blown executive still in my mid 30s. And so it was very daunting. And, I'm sitting in rooms with people who are, in their 50s and 60s and sometimes 70s. And it's if I bring up something, is that going to be, okay, Captain Obvious, we know that. Or, I might bring what I think is innovative, and it's so below the mark. And so for me, it was the mindset that I had to shift from, am I enough, to I have value and I deserve to be here.
Right.
And I deserve to be here because I worked to get here, and I worked to get here, and I earned this. And because I earned it, I'm going to sit here. And so it honestly, it took me to a place where if I present something and it doesn't land well, oh, well. Because when I really sit in the room, in rooms, period, there's a lot of things that people put out there and it doesn't land well, right?
Right.
They're still in the room. Why am I debilitating myself, but then holding myself at a higher standard than those that I'm quote unquote threatened by? So it was a lot. Time for me to work through that. And what I would want the listeners to walk away with, something as simple as I am enough. I'm enough. If I've gotten this seat and I'm in this space, it's because I earned it. And I would tell your listeners, and if you all are listening and you're locked in and you're clocked into what we're saying, know that you're enough, and don't let your mind disqualify you, because your abilities have already qualified you.
I can say firsthand, I'm sure that's speaking directly to some folks listening here, because like you said, to be true with ourselves, we all deal with it in some ways. And to sum it up, the idea of saying that you're enough is that foundation that we all need. So thanks for sharing that, the vulnerability you shared there. And also I can visually see you just kind of navigating through, those early 30 years as you're just kind of in a space where you mentioned that, hey, there's people 50, 60-year-old, and you're just kind of making sure you maintain it and hold your space there. So again, like, thanks for sharing that. I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit as we start to round out the podcast. And I think it's also a great chance to just talk about legacy a little bit. And I know that you've served at every level of government. You've advised leaders, you've shaped culture, you've built programs. But I'm curious, how important do you feel just this idea of mentorship plays in helping to support and elevate others, particularly other Black men? I know along my career, it's been really great to have individuals who kind of tap me and support me along my journey. I'd love to hear, like, how has that shown up for you personally, but also, like, how important is that for you now as you think about your legacy and helping support other young professionals?
So that's a great question. I'm not going to name the person, but when I started in a key position, I was nervous beyond all get up. I was like, can I do this? I don't know if I can do this. Can I do this? Right. And it was this older Black man. And he was sitting across from me, and we had a break, and he said, hey, he said, welcome to this space. It's like he could read my mind. He was like, so glad you're here. You deserve to be here. Now, mind you, I had never met him before, but he was affirming what I needed to hear, right? But what he said was, if you need anything, here's my info. You call me, and I'll make sure you're good.
Oh, man.
And so I'm not one of those people, like, there's some people in life where you could tell people, just call me. Right? Like, I'm not that person that just says, oh, okay, thank you, I appreciate it, and then go back home and struggle. Nah. If I'm struggling, I'm calling my lifelines, right? And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, it's this policy that I have to write. I need support with this. And he's told me, he said, come down to my office. All right. Now, this is a big wig, right? So come down to my office wasn't like down the hallway. It was lace up your boots, get in the car, and drive to this location. So long story short, and he said, and bring some of your team members if you like. So I did that. So I'm driving to where his organization was, get there. I'm thinking I'm gonna, like, it's like me and him, we're gonna like talk this through. And he was there, and he had a whole team.
Oh, man.
He had his entire team that worked on this type of work sitting in a round table, like a boardroom. And he said, this space right here, these people have everything that you need, right? So he said, work with them. They're here for the entire day. Anything that you need, they're at your disposal. And the long story short of the story was that the policy ended up being flawless, right? I was able to pull on those people. They supported us. If there was stuff that we needed later down the line, they would send resources our way and everything. And I remember talking to him, and I said, hey, how can I ever repay you? Oh, like, I mean, like, it wasn't money, but like, what can I do?
Right.
And what he said was, he was like, Nate, he was like, just do it for the next one. Pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward. And I remember that, and it always stuck with me. So then, to your question, when we talk about legacy, there were others that came after me. And when I saw them and they looked like me and they were coming to that same group, or we were part of that same governing body, I was like, hey, you, what do you need? How can I support you? And those same people that I said that to, they're now part of my network. They're part of my system. In fact, I had dinner with one of them last night, right? But that's what mentorship and that's what legacy looks like, right? Because everything that we have in us, it's not for us to hold, it's for us to give. If we give of ourselves and we got to hold on to everything, like if I hold on to everything, then what benefit am I giving? And how am I bringing up new professionals? How am I imparting what I've been given into the next? We have to almost empty ourselves, right?
Yeah.
In order to bring forward the next. And, I had an employee who sent me a message just 2 days ago, and she said, thank you so much for leading us through X, Y, and Z, right? There was a challenging moment in a period. And, this is somebody who I admire, right? But she to, say the same to me. And that's how that thing works. Because when you give of others, others will give to you. And even if they don't give to you, they'll give to others. And the
Right.
reciprocity have never failed us. They've never failed. So that's how you build legacy. You give.
Thanks for sharing that. I just kind of vision you walking into the round table and saying, man, this is the type of energy you bring. And so that sounds like super cool. And also, if you're lucky enough in your career, you could be one of the younger guys and you turn into the OG and you can kind of pass along some of that information. So, man, that's so cool that you're able to share that. And in some ways, it kind of speaks to the next segment of the podcast. And hopefully there's another person top of mind. I'm sure it is for you. But each podcast, we think it's important to shine a light on individuals who have had an impact on our life, a service titan who has impacted us, whether that's in a small way or a big way. And we really think it's important to give people their flowers. And I know for me growing up, it meant the world for an elder or someone I looked up to just kind of acknowledge me and say, I see you, Anton. So I want to give you that space, Nate. Is there someone in your life, again, whether it's a small impact or a big impact, that you'd like to just kind of give them a little bit of shine here on the podcast? I want to give you the floor to recognize a service titan in your life.
See, the problem is I have too many. So, that's a good problem to have. But I'm going to recognize two. I know you said one, but I'm going to recognize two. And that's because I get to go rogue, right? No, so I'm going to recognize one. I got a good buddy of mine. His name is Brian Whitaker. And he is the owner of an organization called Humans of Public Service. And it's affectionately known as HOPS. And I think in more times than ever, recognizing the incredible work of civil servants is needed and necessary. And so I want to recognize him. I think he does really great work highlighting those that serve from a civil perspective. I've served from a civil perspective. I've served AmeriCorps. I've served in the military, right? I've served in nonprofits. I've served in faith-based organizations. Service is not linear. It's not one track. It's not a monolithic way, but I think highlighting civil servants is cool. And so Brian does that through Humans of Public Service. I'd also want to highlight a good buddy of mine, good friend. His name is Justin Jones-Fosu. He is the CEO of Work Meaningful, but he is also doing work, and it's called Give Meaningful. And he's supporting educational endeavors in the continent of Africa, specifically the country of Ghana, as well as the United States. And he's doing really cool work there. Yeah, he just got a couple of grants and he's just doing great work. He just built a school in Ghana and it was through efforts of merely fundraising. So I'm going to shout both of them out.
No, thanks for that. And Nate, I'd also can say I kind of laughed, said I can definitely rock with you because I'm the same way. I must squeeze another one in there. So before we conclude the conversation, Nate, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners, perhaps your social media handles or any projects you're currently working on that might be interested in them? I definitely want to give you the space. Are there things that you feel like you want to just highlight for the audience?
Absolutely. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Nathaniel H. Benjamin. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram, also Nathaniel H. Benjamin, all one word. I would also say I do really great work in the human capital arena. And when it's human capital, whether it's coaching and work that's based on belonging and culture, and you can find that at verticalworks.org. That is my company. I've done some really great work with educational organizations as well as a couple of for-profit orgs as well. So if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Facebook at Vertical Works. You can follow me on Instagram at verticalworks.org. And if you want more information, you can email me at info@verticalworks.org. But the website is verticalworks.org.
Now, Nate, again, truly thank you for taking the time to join the podcast and for sharing your insights, your experiences. Listeners, be sure to connect with Nate on the platforms he highlighted. And with that, until next time, keep the conversation flowing, keep service front and center, and continue shining bright in your communities. This is Service Titans. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us as we explored the inspiring journeys of Black men in AmeriCorps. Keep the conversation going by connecting with us on social media. Until next time, stay committed, stay courageous, and keep striving to make a difference. This is Service Titans, where every story told is a testament to the power of service. Thank you for listening.